we may have more burst and explosive potential with these cooldowns, but until we reach, like, I'm talking like Overwatch League level coordination, we're not going to be able to use this composition as easily compared to a composition like this. The plan today is to talk about Double Bubble. We've been basically only reviewing one composition up until now, and since we do play two compositions, it's about time we talk about the other one. So before I even jump into any game specifics, any match specifics, I want us to go around the trust circle and have everyone list one thing that they are focusing on as each of their roles in Double Bubble. So if you can, start with Louis. What's one thing you focus on as Winston in Double Bubble?
I guess like Cleavy and not letting them walk in for free.
Cleave. Good. Tin. What's one thing you focus on in Double Bubble?
Bubble rotation.
It's in the name. Bubbles.
Yes.
Good. Stasis. We'll also cover Arrow since he does play in these compositions sometimes. But Stasis, you're in this game. So what's one thing you focus on in Double Bubble?
Probably like hacks, just in general, just like hack usage.
All right. Finding priority hacks, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Blank. What's one thing you focus on in Double Bubble?
Is scouting a valid answer?
Of course. Anything you focus on is a valid answer. Kinetic.
Keeping the squishies up.
Squishies. I'm just going to break everything down to one word.
Cool.
And Skullex, our other support.
Positioning.
Ooh. And Arrow, since you're not in this lobby.
With Double Bubble,
Yeah.
I would say, yeah, positioning and angles and rotation.
All right, good. So there's one thing here that no one said, and that's integral to the composition. And does anyone know what that thing is?
I would have to guess it would be. I mean, ultimates
Rotations?
are the most important part of the composition.
I'd say rotations.
Would it be like weaving in and out of fights, kind of thing?
So
Like
the
not
answer,
committing. Sorry.
I'm kind of baiting you guys because there is an answer I'm looking for. The answer I'm looking for, and something that every single one of you should be thinking of during any team fight, during any setup phase, and that's what everyone else is doing, and that's your teammates. What I'm noticing as a common trend whenever we play Double Bubble is we're doing a lot of micro things well. We're playing our heroes well, but we're not playing as a team well. We're not playing the composition to what it does best, and that's in finding a ton of synergy between all 6 of its members. It doesn't come down to just the Winston and Zarya using bubbles. It doesn't come down to just the DPS finding aggression together. It doesn't come down to just the ports supporting each other. It's all 6 members working together as one. And that's what makes this composition so strong. That's what makes this composition not just a dive composition. That's what makes this composition not just something that's like Rushy and Brawly. It's the ability to layer all 6 kits in your arsenal to get the most efficiency out of yourself, of course, but also to play for your teammates. As Winston, when you're jumping in, you need to be thinking about where and when your Zarya bubble is coming in. You need to be thinking about when your DPS are following up and from what angles. You need to be thinking about what supports can follow you up and what kind of support space they're working with. So whether or not you'll have healing and stuff like that. When you're playing any other hero, you need to be thinking about the same things. As Zarya, you need to be thinking about when Winston's cooldowns are coming up, when you need to be walking up to help pressure with him, when you need to be playing safer for your supports, when you need to be lining up cooldowns with your DPS if they've got ultimates coming up. Same thing, DPS and supports. You're looking at the tank line and the other members on your team as well. So I really think the biggest problem, and I'll showcase this in VOD as we go through it. This is the match from Boise State, I believe. Is that the one I was looking at? Is that who these guys are? Okay. We didn't do great on this map, but that's okay. We have a lot to learn. And I think it's going to show really obviously this point I'm making, where we're making a lot of individual plays, good individual plays, but we're not able to sync up our resources as a 6-man squad in this composition, and we may as well just be playing a dive comp, or we may as well just be playing brawl comp, because at least in those compositions, it's pretty brain dead how you work together. You all go in at once, you go on in one target, and then you either get that kill and go on to the next, or you stabilize and try and find out the next setup. This composition is a lot more nuanced. There's a lot more that goes into the neutral game. There's a lot more positioning focused things that need to come out from these heroes specifically, since they are a lot less mobile than traditional dive heroes. But the biggest thing I want all of us to be looking at is not only looking at your own play when we're going over this review, but look at what you're doing in relation to the other members of your team. So Louis, when you're diving in, where's the rest of your team? Tin, when you're following up or using bubbles, where's the rest of your team? Supports, same thing. TPS, same thing. The only other thing I wanted to say before going over this VOD is I have nothing against you, Stasis, as a player or anything like that, but I don't think we can use Sombra in this comp. I don't think we have the coordination right now. I think we just hot swap this to Tracer. I believe you're comfortable playing Tracer, Stasis? Okay. And I think it's just...
I dabble.
You dabble? You've been
dabble.
known to dabble in the Tracer?
In Tracer's jail.
I really think that just putting Tracer instead of Sombra, for a number of reasons that I'm not going to go too hard into, is just going to make everyone's job easier. It's going to make it easier to do things like mark the payload. It's going to be easier to follow up on dives. It's going to be easier to take duels. It's going to be easier to find win conditions.
I think it's like more easy just for me to set up, because especially with Sombra, like, I don't know, I just feel more slow.
Yeah. So
I mean, yeah.
the thing, we'll talk about this matchup specifically too. So let's actually get into that. So to my point about talking about Sombra, and the reason I like Tracer over Sombra in this composition is because Sombra is more cooldown dependent than Tracer. Tracer's uptime in a fight is much higher than Sombra's. Because if Sombra ever gets forced out, she needs to run back into the fight. She needs to wait for a translocator to be placed in a good spot. She needs to look to either farm or look for hacks, and she needs to position differently based on either of those situations. Tracer has a much easier time being in the mid-fight and adapting to different target calls, adapting to different positionings, following up targets just in general, and like you said, setting up in the pre-fight to be able to do all those things. So across the board right now, our composition versus their composition, the biggest difference, I would say, and this is going to swap to a Tracer as well, so here, maybe I'll just play that so we actually see the composition. The biggest difference across the board from these heroes, from specifically the DPS line, is how cooldown dependent we are and how sort of stable and consistent they are. So for example, as Ashe versus Echo, if we just look at the pure 1v1, if you don't get value out of your sticky bombs, if you don't have a good shift to close the distance, if you don't land some good shots during your engagement timing and then get within beam range and get them down to half HP, you're never going to win that duel. Whereas Ashe just needs to kind of sit around and take shots at you. As Tracer versus Sombra, basically you should never win that duel unless you get a hack off. You're very dependent on landing your CDs in order for you to find value. And that doesn't apply just to the duel. It applies to finding value in this composition as a whole. So for example, when if we're hard diving their backline, it's much harder for us to play around these CDs, and it's a lot less consistent. Unless every fight we go into, we're getting a hack off, we're getting big sticky bombs, we're beaming some target down. It's a lot harder to execute that, just from a mechanical perspective even, than it is for them to dive in. Ashe is just sit in their backline, take some shots, Tracer to triple blink forward if she needs to, or be in position already pre-fight, and just shoot her gun instead of looking for hacks, instead of looking for priority targets that way. So we may have more burst and explosive potential with these cooldowns, but until we reach, I'm talking like Overwatch League level coordination, we're not going to be able to use this composition as easily compared to a composition like this. So just by eliminating Sombra and putting in Tracer, that makes our job, I would say, 3 times easier. But even putting in heroes that are technically more consistent than Echo could be good too. Putting in an Ashe, if we're able to play Ashe, putting in a McCree. But Echo Tracer is also very, very good. And Echo, I would say, is the least cooldown dependent out of these two heroes. So it's not the worst choice. But definitely, I think from from this point moving forward, I want to eliminate Sombra from our compositions because we're straight up, I'm sorry to say it, guys, we're not coordinated enough to make it work. And we're shooting ourselves in the foot by rolling out on this, basically, because we're telling ourselves we've set the bar so high that if we execute, it's going to look huge. We're going to make huge plays, but we need so much coordination just to hit that level that it's not consistent enough right now. So putting in tracers is going to make that easier. Before moving into the VOD itself, does anyone have any problems with that? Any questions around that? Tin ends up going down here. Unfortunately, again, we don't have the stability to maintain space. We need to be really in and out like the tide throughout this composition, because you can almost think of this matchup as sort of like, this is almost like a dive comp. We're playing a dive comp versus a spam comp if you look purely at the DPS lines. And the one thing you do as dive versus spam is you never show yourself until you're ready to commit. You leverage your CDs by holding them and maintaining full HP, maintaining full resources until a position where you can layer all your CDs on top of each other and get value out of them. But right now they're getting value just off of, like, this is all just off the back of Winston jumping up, getting bubbled, throwing his bubble down, Ash and Ana walking forward. That's basically all they did. They didn't make any real plays. They just played as if they were building ult charge, found an advantage, and then just kept applying pressure because they had that positioning. There's nothing we can do now without our tank and now without our Sombra to deny that position from Ash and Ana, so they're chilling. So again, we're just showing too much too early without a reason to go aggressive. And in this matchup specifically, we need to be very, very patient and very, very coordinated around those cooldowns. This type of setup, we're all coming in from one angle. Our backline's forced to play up and forward, leaving them within dive range, or even worse, isolation range. So Winston doesn't even need to kill our Ana here to make her useless. Winston needs to jump like right here and throw a bubble down, and then what does our Ana do throughout that team fight? Your options are to either just give up on your team and go set up high ground, or try to like run through the bubble, maybe try walk around it and just isolate yourself even more and make yourself an even easier dive target. Mm-hmm. But this kind of like linear movement, it's what makes, this is what double bubble is good at punishing. So same thing here. If we see their Ana, their Brig in line with other members, with their Zarya, if their Zarya was pushing forward, their Winston's diving deep, all we have to do is throw a bubble right here and it cuts their team in half. So we also, as much as we want to look for these situations ourselves, we need to avoid putting ourselves in this defensive position like this. We want to be using high grounds. We want to be using natural cover to avoid being dove. We want to be using more, not necessarily like spread out, but more advantageous positioning in the pre-fight. And we're just sort of always taking this fight on the back foot. Even though we just got 2 picks, they're still able to exert more pressure because we're going in sort of like half are going in one side, the other half's going in the other side. Sometimes we're going in at this tempo, other people are going in at a different tempo. And yeah, their Winston just carried this fight because we weren't able to fully follow up our aggression.
Okay, I have a question then for Louis, Tin, and you, I guess, all at the same time. Whose comms should we be prioritizing? The backline's comms or the front lines? Or
I think,
how should that interaction work?
So in general, this composition plays pretty much solely around Winston's cooldowns. Everything else is sort of used to supplement Winston's cooldowns. He's the one dictating the space, the tempo, the engage timing, all that stuff. If we have cooldowns like Bubble, that can help Winston make those decisions. If we have things like Nano, if we've got good positioning from our Ana, stuff like that. But in the same vein, if we don't have those cooldowns, if we don't have good positioning, our Winston needs to adapt and play more defensively. If we say something like, we're getting primal to Africa, we can't help the front line, we probably should, at least we should understand that we don't have support when we're going this aggressive. We can still make plays to disrupt them and stuff like this, especially like a primal play. You probably don't need a ton of support for that. But in general, Winston is the one calling the shots, and everyone else is supplying information about how much they can support the Winston in this composition.
Okay. So should also all of your like action calls you're putting out should be about the Winston, or like how, or like what you can do, what you still have.
At the very least, the aggressive action calls.
Basically telling the Winston what he can and can't do.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Does that sound good to you, Louis?
Yep.
All right, perfect. And yeah, there's a lot of nuance to playing Winston in this composition for sure, and it will be up to you at the end of the day about how you handle that information. But everyone else should be looking to Louis and absolutely listening to Louis, especially when he's going in and setting up and stuff like that, because we need to be playing around his cooldowns. Every single member needs to be playing around Winston's cooldowns, whether that's bubbles being saved, setting up for hacks and flanks, setting up for aggressive movement or an aggressive ultimate, looking to follow up with positioning and getting in good heal range and all that kind of stuff. This is something that some teams struggle with, but I want to try with you guys. I want to eliminate the 3-2-1 call because it's too strict in my mind.
Yeah.
It's not flexible enough because you're kind of just dictating. It's like 3-2-1, you better be ready. I want the calls to sound something like this. So right before this Winston jump comes in, I want to hear from Louis something like, I'm looking to jump either A, a target at a specific location, or B, a specific timing, like when the payload hits corner. Does that make sense? So even if you aren't able to call a specific target because you don't have the scouting or whatever, you can always call based on location, based on where their front line's moving in, based on where the payload's moving in, that kind of thing. This hitting a corner is a good opportunity to go in because they are splitting the sight lines between here and here. So we just by cutting this corner, we eliminate these sight lines and we have the potential of isolating anyone around the corner. During that time, when Louis is calling, I'm looking to jump at this timing or at this location, we need to hear from our DPS a no call if they're not ready. Otherwise, we assume everyone is ready. If we don't have bubble, we call, I don't have bubble. If our Ana's coming back from spawn or something, it's like, hold on, I don't have sightline. If our DPS aren't in a good flank or aren't set up to follow up the dive at the location, because even if we call just when card hits corner, they should understand where the fight's generally going to happen. Whether that means going deeper or expecting backline members to be there or just following up the targets in this fight zone. So instead of calling 3-2-1 and waiting for the ready check, I want us to call intention from Louis. And again, follow that up with ideally a target and a location, but if nothing else, a timing based on the cart or the enemy front line, because they're the ones dictating the space for the enemy. This could even be like a counter dive call, like when Winston jumps, I'm going to counter dive him, and then our DPS set up more defensively to counter dive. But generally, when we're looking to go aggressive, that's the kind of conversation I want to hear. And the only thing our DPS need to change in that instance is being ready to call no when they're not ready. And more than anything, that's going to challenge your active listening because you're already thinking about a lot. You're thinking about your pathing into the fight. You're thinking about what targets you want to get into. You're thinking about your ultimate that you're building, all these things. But when you hear Louis call that he's looking for an engage, know that you've got max like 5 seconds to say like, oh, I'm not ready for that. Hold on. Give me another 2 seconds. Let me set up over here. Let me go force this tracer out first. Let me go find an angle to hack. Let me go get behind them kind of thing. If we want to micromanage it a little bit more, we could say something like wait means we're still setting up. No means we're canceling the engage. But typically, if we're like hard canceling an engage, we'll hear more communication than just no.
Yeah, it'll be because something else is happening somewhere
Yeah,
else.
exactly. No, it's like, no, wait, reset. No, we're falling back. No, your Ana's not there. Stuff like that. But if it's just like a wait from a DPS, it's like, it might be something like, no, I need 2 seconds. That kind of thing.
Would it be
Gotcha.
beneficial to change the comm to is anyone not ready? Or
No, because that takes too long, I think.
I mean,
No, I just ask if everyone is ready.
Yeah.
Like, are we ready? That's all I ask, and I think
Yeah.
that's fine.
as long as it comes out naturally and it comes out consistently, I think now that we've talked about it outside of game, everyone will understand that intention coming from Louis, right?
Yeah.
Everyone knows why we're calming this. It's not like he's asking a specific person and we're only expecting one answer. He's asking the team if we're ready to make a team play. And yeah, there's not a whole lot else from this VOD I wanted to go over anyway.